You might feel like you're having trouble connecting with other people, and honestly, you're not alone in that. Social skills are in decline, and so keeping everything simple, let's dive into that. Welcome back to the Keeping Everything Simple podcast. I'm your host and fellow student, Michael Klukas, and on this show, we boil down complicated topics into simple, actionable tips. So, there's been this kind of gradual shift over time where our social skills, which is no surprise to a lot of people, have declined in how well we can use them. So, launching straight into it, honestly, I want to start off with the first segment of the show, the complications. And so, for the first complication that's made it a bit harder, I would say, over time to fully utilize our social skills has been screen time going up and outings going down. Now, this sounds like a very obvious kind of trend to pick at, and I understand that because most of the time you tend to hear it as, wow, you're spending so much time on your phone, give me that. Or, hey, you're spending so much time on your computer playing video games, you should go outside. Or, our more modern version, you should go out and touch some grass. And honestly, while it's an obvious kind of low hanging fruit to pick at, you can't say that it's not quite accurate either, because honestly, there is truth behind it. The fact that we spend so much time now behind the screen, the fact that we spend so much time talking to each other via text or video call is very different than going out to a restaurant, going out to your mall, your local burger joint, essentially, and hanging out and doing something in person. And that has taken a hit to our social skills, our ability to empathize, our ability to read emotions, our ability to read body language. There's been this whole host of, I would say, not necessarily problems, but changes that have occurred that we didn't really account for. And anymore, we have to be aware that it is correlated. There is some connection between the amount of time we spend on our screen or interacting through a digital space versus us interacting in person. Because to use the skills, or to put it simply, if you don't use the skills that you have, you will lose them over time. And social skills, I believe, are in the same boat. Because if we don't use them and we don't properly utilize them, then of course, over time, they're going to slowly go down. And so that's, again, just the first complication that makes this such a difficult and complicated problem. And so the next point is then this thing called phone separation anxiety. Now, you probably know what I'm talking about here, where a easy example of this is like the phantom vibrations, where you don't even have your phone on you and you suddenly check your pocket because you think you feel it vibrate, or you look at it and you're like, oh, did I just get a notification or did I hear the bell? If you're some weirdo like me that has the actual bell notification alert on, yeah, I feel like it's really odd now, but that's besides the point. There's this separation anxiety that we get now from our devices. And again, this is of no real fault to the user. And I say this as a member of Gen Z, where we all can kind of, I think at this point, come to some kind of consensus that we did not fully understand the implications of the smartphone when it was first invented, when Steve Jobs first brought it onto the scene, and how much it would drastically change our life. And the easy example here is the fact that, oh, you were told growing up you'd never have a calculator with you every single day of your life, and they were wrong. Now, honestly, it's this idea though that we need our phones kind of like a crutch to lean on, and we get this kind of anxiety that makes us feel less able to navigate a situation without it, or kind of more awkward and out of place when we don't use it in public. Because for myself, there's been this shift of, if I'm standing in line at the grocery store, I'm avidly trying to not pull my phone out and start scrolling through Instagram, start scrolling through TikTok, just doing something to distract myself for like 5 minutes while I'm waiting for some slow person to check out their stuff, for them to stop talking to the cashier so I can get in and out. But no, it's me choosing to like try to not use my phone during that time, because I don't want to have this kind of phone separation anxiety, where I think that might be something that's relatable to you guys, because we honestly want to have our phone with us so often that it gets to be almost a type of challenge to not have it on us. And it's good to kind of push that boundary for ourselves to say, okay, I don't need this with me all the time. I don't need to pull out my phone while I'm standing in line at the grocery store, while I'm filling up my car with gas. There's a lot of different things we can do, or just taking a moment to kind of observe stuff around us, which, again, I know does not sound like the most exciting thing in the world. There'd be a lot more dopamine flooding my brain if I just whipped out my phone and started scrolling through Instagram reels. I get that, but it's not the life that I want to lead. And that's what, again, makes this shift gradual over time and so kind of hard to pin down. And ultimately, with this being the second complication, it's just something to be aware of. It's something to kind of take note of, because the more that we give our attention away to something else, the less we are actually leaving in our own hands to use and to distribute on things that actively matter to us, like our friends, like our relationships, and being able to put good effort behind them. And real quick, if you're watching this on YouTube and you are enjoying this episode, make sure you do leave us a like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you'll know every single time that I post a new episode. If you're listening to us on a podcast app of choice, leave us a 5-star rating. It helps me out so much. Follow a podcast as well, so that way you know every time a new podcast hits your feed. Let's dive right back in. So the third complication here is something that I'm kind of framing as the illusion of depth. And the reason I call it the illusion of depth is this is something that I am definitely guilty of, and I imagine a lot of us have done at some point or another, has just been the having multiple conversations going on at once, maybe even with the same person, of varying degrees. This is me doing air quotes if you're watching this on YouTube, quote unquote degrees of depth and seriousness, where I've definitely seen the joke where we're on text message having a normal conversation about, yeah, I think fries are better with ranch versus ketchup, and then on Snapchat and that's why I think I never healed from that childhood trauma and why it impacts me so much today. That is a thing that happens, and I am aware of this. But I call it the illusion of depth because it's not necessarily a bad thing. And I want to emphasize that a lot, because being able to actively have a deeper conversation with somebody, even if it is split up, is better than not having that conversation. Because in the event that you didn't have it at all, then that'd be a very different relationship and a very different type of conversation. So that's why I think there is value in it. But I call it the illusion of depth because you don't actively go all the way down into the core roots of some of these conversations, some of these problems, some of these questions that we have together. And that makes it a lot harder then as well to initiate that level of connection, that level of deep questioning and understanding when you're in person too. Because it almost feels, I would say, uncomfortable if you aren't used to it, where over text you might feel, okay, we can talk about this trauma, we can talk about this bad experience that this person had, this bad memory, whatever it is. But also, we're having a lighthearted conversation over here, so it's less strenuous, it's less stressful, and that's where I think the illusion comes in, because when we get in person, when we actually have opportunities to have these deep, genuine conversations with people, it doesn't always work because we might not feel prepared for it. We might feel, oh, wow, this is very heavy, and I would like to have some sort of lightness, levity to the conversation, which I understand. I am definitely someone who tries to sneak in a joke here and there, and that is despite the fact that it doesn't always land well. My fiance can attest to that. It's a bad habit at times. But that's why I think it's an illusion that we have to acknowledge, where if we're able to have the conversation even as a start, that's great. But we have to also be able to carry that conversation into our real life aspects as well, and have these deeper, meaningful connections in person. And that's what, again, makes this a complication, is it's using the skill, but not truly learning and internalizing it in a way that is going to foster a wonderful, healthy relationship. And so, comment down below, have you felt it's become harder to have deep conversations with your friends or your family? If you're watching on YouTube, let me know your thoughts on that down below. Moving on now to the second segment of the show, conflicts. This shift in how we interact has presented many kind of conflicting issues as well, because we're trying to exist in kind of two mediums. So the first conflict that really takes hold here is the rapid advance in digital communication has stunted interpersonal communication. Let me explain. Being able to have, again, those deep conversations as an example, we have to use skills, different types of skill sets that are kind of compounding one on top of another, that allows us to feel comfortable in those type of conversations, or even if not comfortable, we at least feel we can navigate them with a bit more ease and a bit more understanding. And I say that because it is, again, smaller micro skills all stacked up on top of each other. It is the ability to empathize if someone is going through something that you haven't gone through yourself, but you can at least empathize and relate to the emotion in some capacity. That's a skill set, but it gets compounded on top of knowing when to use humor, because, again, like I said, I am definitely someone that will use humor at very inopportune times, and I think it's going to add a little bit of lightheartedness to a situation, and it turns out I just made the person feel like I was not listening to them, and it is not good. I will readily admit that. That's not good. But that'd be the second thing. And then there's body language, being able to say, okay, wow, they're tensing up a little bit. I can see them crossing their arms, feeling a bit closed off, and then seeing that they're kind of avoiding eye contact, so they're a little bit kind of nervous about it. But it's just like picking up on these cues. And then not only that, there's then social cues, being able to say, like, okay, wow, I shouldn't bring this up in a loaded coffee shop, versus, okay, we're at so-and-so's place and we're hanging out late night. Conversations are slowly getting deeper and deeper. This is a good time to bring this up. And that's a compounding just way that our skills work together. And the advancement in digital communication has added accessibility, but limitations to those skills, because as much as I can hear a text read in someone's tone of voice, and that's something that I know not everybody can do, I acknowledge that, but also that's just one thing that happens, is we start trying to ascribe different cues and different traits to the styles of communication, where for most of Gen Z, it's usually reported that we like to use FaceTime. Like, we prefer FaceTime over a call. If someone calls us, we're like, what is wrong with you? What do you want? But if someone FaceTimes us, we're like, oh, okay, what's up? And there's still a little bit of friction to it, but it's a bit more recognized than a call. But the thing is, then we're still missing out on some of the social cues and some of like the body language cues that we would get from an in-person conversation. because it's just your face. And even at times like that, it may be not even their face. It may be them propping the phone up on the counter while they're putting on makeup, while they're cooking dinner, while they are going about doing something. And you're not actively like looking at each other for the conversation. And so, and this is a broad generalization. I would like to also acknowledge that, because there are some instances where this stuff helps out so much in maintaining good connections. It's just having to recognize that the skill sets are being used in a different way and sometimes not as effectively as they could be. The second complication here is these kind of shrinking social spaces, wow. This is why I went to speech therapy as a kid, but it's the shrinking social spaces that don't involve a paywall. So I say this as we understand that it is expensive to go out and do things. It is expensive at times to find ways to hang out. And it doesn't always have to be. There are obviously inexpensive ways to do that. There's plenty of resources on Google and YouTube that say, hey, here's an inexpensive thing to do, or here's something to do for free. But finding ways to have those outings with people, finding ways to feel that we don't have to spend money to go do something with a person that we like hanging out with some of our best friends, that has an added layer of, again, conflict, because we have these kind of two conflicting pieces. Like, we want to see our friends, we want to go out and do something, but doing something often costs money. And sometimes we don't always have the money to go do the thing. We don't always have the money to go pay for the restaurant that we want to go have dinner at. We don't always have money to go pay for the arcade ticket that we want to go play in the games. But whatever it is, it just comes down to the fact that there has been this kind of decline in space that allow you to just hang out without the expectation that you spend some money, or two, are willing to spend money and just allow you to exist in them. Libraries, I think, are probably the best example about this. Like, I love my public library with a passion. That is one of my favorite places. And it's a great spot if I want to go meet up with somebody and hang out. But it's then also recognizing that that is more of an anomaly, because if I go to a local diner or a local kind of coffee spot, the expectation in there is you don't have to buy something, but the expectation exists that you should buy something or that you will buy something. And so it makes it kind of difficult to find these social spaces that don't have that extra layer of expectation on top of you to be a consumer before you can just be this kind of wall observer type of individual. And that, again, just presents a conflict as we try to find ways to maintain these good, healthy connections without trying to add the extra stress on top of them of how am I going to do this and where's a good space to do this. And so what exactly then is the solution here? I don't know what would honestly solve this problem overall, but here are the things that have worked for me very well. The first one has been planning in-person meetups so we can actually look forward to these events. And this allows us to kind of strategize a little bit and make time and make use of spaces that we know are either free to use, or we can actively save up for a certain outing. And not only that, having these in-person meetings allow you to, again, have something to look forward to, because as humans, we psychologically like to have something to look forward to, some reward, some type of goal. And they tend to put it as we tend to look forward to a vacation more than the actual vacation itself, even though the vacation itself could be completely awesome. It's just this impact of psychologically knowing, hey, I'm going to see my best friend next week, and I'm excited for that. I'm looking forward to it. The week's going by, and I'm counting down the days, and there's just this added layer of excitement. And that's been a huge game changer for myself, where I will obviously text the friends and call the friends that I don't live near, but make it a more important priority to say, all right, I'm going to find time to meet up with you we're getting dinner, we're getting lunch, we're gonna do something together. And that makes sure that I'm using my social skills and that I am not solely relying on digital communication to maintain my relationships. The second thing that's really helped me out here is minimizing distractions during meaningful time, or otherwise known as quality time. For my fiance and I try to make it a very avid point to, when we're having dinner, I'm not on my phone. I'm not doing anything other than paying attention to our conversation. And this translates also to my friendships. When I am with my friends, my goal is to have my phone on silent, do not disturb, DND it, and that was really dumb. But put on do not disturb and just not interact with my phone and pay full attention to the person I am with, because I want to intentionally put my attention on them and the time that's being spent with them. And that again feels a bit odd at times, I know, but it's much more impactful and allows you to be much more present when you do actually get time to meet up with them, rather than being like, okay, I don't remember what we were talking about 5 minutes ago, versus, wow, yeah, you talked about this at the beginning when we first got together. Like, you want to talk about that a little bit more? It's just a nice way of being able to take control again of your attention, because that's the one thing that you can fully give to somebody, and in a way it will help elevate your relationships to a new level. The third thing here has been using devices for genuine connections rather than only entertainment. So throughout most of the days anyways, I try to spend very little time on social media. It's not me saying I don't ever use it. It's me saying if I am on it, then I'm choosing to create something instead to the best of my ability, or interact with people in the best of my ability. But I try not to use it as kind of just this doom scrolling, which I know we all do at some point or another. I did it last night, like the day I'm filming this. I did it last night as well before I went to bed. I understand that. But the main thing here is that it's trying to use it for fostering genuine connection. So if I have, like I said, friends that don't live near me, it's, hey, let me give them a call. Not just a FaceTime call where we're doing our own things, but a call where, for whatever reason, it just feels a bit more intentional, and like I have to be paying more attention to it, and allows me to help continue to foster that kind of relationship that I want to have and that I want to grow with them. And so I really emphasize that piece of the puzzle here, is choosing an intentional usage of our devices and not just using them for entertainment, because it's super easy to get sucked down the entertainment dopamine hole, which we're all well aware of. And trying to break that cycle helps not only your relationships, but just your overall quality of life. Now, the secret tip here also is to practice holding uncomfortable spaces, as well as understanding the fundamentals of body language. You can watch plenty of YouTube videos on how to read body language, how to understand body language, but holding uncomfortable spaces as well is so important. Like, I cannot emphasize this one enough as kind of like the major tip. For myself, this is learning about like relationship styles and how we have conflict styles. For myself, I am very, very avoidant, and I recognize this. Being in uncomfortable spaces is truly uncomfortable for me, and that means I have to dive into them and maintain those spaces more often than not. Because if I don't ever expose myself to them, and if I don't ever allow myself to get used to them in a way that allows me to still use my social skills, then it's going to be much harder when there's a meaningful point, or maybe there's sometimes a really bad situation that I have to help someone with, or sit in silence with somebody. And not being able to do that would reflect both poorly, but also would, in some level, kind of hinder that relationship, or sometimes damage that relationship, if you're not able to be there when they need you. And so I put that as a very important skill, because it doesn't just have to be, oh wow, something really bad happened. It can honestly be like, wow, I kind of feel uncomfortable with the conversation. And I don't mean this in a manner of, hey, this just feels icky, but more of a, hey, I feel that you are having a strong emotional reaction right now to something, and it can be just sadness, it can be frustration, and I'm a little bit uncomfortable with it, but I need to let you feel what you feel and hold this space for you. That in of itself is a skill set that we have to keep practicing and we have to keep refining, because for myself personally, I can't just avoid every high emotional situation because I don't feel confident in that. Instead, I have to dive into it and say, I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to get better at this. So that way, this person knows that they can have these types of emotional charges around me and it's safe to do so. And I will talk it through with them as it waxes and as it wanes. In other words, the highs and the lows. But reversing course here honestly won't be easy, and no one expects you to be perfect in upgrading and leveling up your social skills. For myself personally, I know that my social skills have declined in the past year or two, and that's something that I'm trying to reverse course on. And these are just things that have helped me improve and improve my social skills when I feel that kind of gradual shift that's happened over time. So I encourage you to know that you're not alone in that, but also to try out these simplified actions and see how much they impact your life and which ones work best for you. So, with that, that's the pod. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you're watching us on YouTube. Again, comment down below if you feel it's harder to have deep conversations now, and also what other simplified actions do you feel is going to help you out best. If you're listening to us on a podcast app of choice, leave us a 5-star rating. That will help elevate my social skills, I promise. Maybe. But it does help the show out so much, and shares it with other people just like you. And with that, keeping everything simple, have an amazing day, you amazing people, and I will see you all in the next episode. Go out there and do great things.